After discovering the truth about my birth, I received an unexpected offer. Before we begin the story, make sure to subscribe to our channel and never miss more incredible stories every day. When Victor Hale slid the folder across the glass table, he said, "This is what I'm prepared to offer you, Maya, if you agree to forget the circumstances of your birth." I stared at the folder without opening it. The conference room on the 42nd floor felt more like an aquarium than an office. Floor-to-ceiling windows, quiet hum of AC, tiny people moving like insects on the street below. I kept thinking about how a month earlier, I was just a regular 28-year-old social worker who worried about rent, not legal deals about my own existence. Before all this, my life was small but solid. I worked at a community clinic in the city, mostly with families juggling too many jobs and not enough options. I believed in honesty, in listening, in fighting for kids who didn't get a say. At night, I drove back to the suburb where I'd grown up, to the same modest split-level house where my parents, Diane and Tom, still lived. Netflix on the couch, Diane's lasagna, Tom's terrible dad jokes, my world. We weren't perfect, but we were close. They came to every birthday, every work event that allowed +1s. 2 months ago, we'd celebrated my promotion to lead case manager. Diane cried when I showed her the badge. Tom insisted on taking us to Olive Garden like it was a Michelin restaurant. If you'd asked me that night what I knew for sure, I'd have said, my parents love me, and they've always done their best. If you're listening to this and thinking, I know my family, they'd never lie like that, I thought the same thing. I would have bet my life on it. In a way, I guess I did. Back in Victor's office, his gold watch flashed when he clasped his hands, waiting. The folder between us felt heavier than any file I'd ever held at work. Inside, he said, was the price of my silence about how I actually came into this world. And the worst part was, a tiny voice in me already wanted to say yes. Would you take the money if it meant rewriting your entire identity? To understand how I got there, you have to see the moment everything cracked. It started in fluorescent light, not in a fancy office. 3 weeks before I met Victor, I was in the ER with a patient from the clinic, Mrs. Ramirez, who didn't have anyone else to sit with her. When the nurse asked about her blood type, she didn't know, and I joked that I only remembered mine because Diane kept it on a magnet on the fridge. Maya? Oh, positive, like Mom. The nurse smiled politely, then frowned at my chart. You're a negative, she said. I laughed, assuming she'd mixed up files. No, I'm O positive. My mom told me. She double-checked the wristband. Your recent labs say a negative. We typed you 2 years ago before that minor surgery, see? She turned the screen so I could read my own name next to a dash. It was small, stupid, easy to explain. I texted Diane from the waiting area. Hey, random question, what's my blood type again? She replied with a string of emojis and, O+, same as me. Why? Something in my chest pinched. I typed, hospital says a dash. Maybe they're wrong, LOL. She answered too fast. Must be. They mix things up all the time. Don't worry about it. I tried not to. For 2 days, I repeated Diane's line in my head. Hospitals mix things up. I'd seen it at work, lost forms, wrong addresses, misprinted insurance cards. Life is messy. But at night, I kept seeing the nurse's face as she tapped the screen, the confidence in the way she said, we typed you 2 years ago. I finally pulled out my dusty plastic folder of personal documents, the one Diane had given me when I turned 18, birth certificate, vaccination records, old report cards. Only this time, I noticed something I'd never seen before, tucked behind the birth certificate. It was a photocopy, yellowed at the edges, of a hospital wristband with my birth date and a last name I didn't recognize. The last name on the band was Hale, not Carter, and my hands started to shake. I told myself it had to be a clerical error. Maybe they'd given my mom the wrong band, or maybe she'd stuck it in there as a joke and forgotten. But jokes don't usually come with tiny printed numbers and a hospital logo. The band said, Baby Girl Hale, August 17, 1997, St. Augustine Medical Center. My birth certificate said, Maya Diane Carter, August 17, 1997, St. Augustine Medical Center. I sat at my kitchen table, the laminate edge digging into my forearms, reading the 2 names over and over. Carter, Hale, Carter, Hale. The letters blurred. I thought about calling Diane right away, but something in me hesitated. Instead, I called Jonah. He's my cousin technically, Tom's sister's kid, but we were raised more like siblings. Jonah works in IT, which means in my mind, he can access the Library of Congress from his phone. Hey, you busy? I asked, trying to sound casual. For you? Never, he said. I heard keyboard clacking in the background. What's up? I told him about the blood type, the wristband. He whistled softly. Weird. You want me to help you look up your medical records? I already have them, I said. That's the problem. They don't match what Mom remembers. He was quiet for a second. You think they switched bands or something? I don't know, I said. But it's bugging me. He cleared his throat. Okay, this might be overkill, but my sister just did one of those DNA kits. She got it on sale. I can grab you one. If nothing else, it'd prove you're Diane and Tom's, right? I laughed too loudly. Right? Sure. Why not? Let's prove my parents aren't secret millionaires or something. We both knew we were joking, but my stomach rolled. 2 days later, he handed me a small white box at a coffee shop. It looked harmless, like something that should come with a cute quote on Instagram, not a life-destroying revelation. Spit, send, forget, Jonas said, nudging it toward me. In 6 weeks, you'll have way more cousins than you want. I told myself it was just for fun, just to end the weirdness in my head. I had no idea I'd be meeting my biological father before the results even came back. The DNA kit sat on my counter for a week, unopened. Work got busy. The clinic had a run of housing emergencies, and my own identity crisis felt indulgent compared to families sleeping in their cars. But every time I reached for the salt, the box stared back at me. The actual breaking point came in the dumbest way. We were at Sunday dinner, me, Diane, and Tom, eating roast chicken at the worn oak table I'd grown up around. Diane poured herself a glass of red wine, then reached for the bottle of her blood pressure meds. Didn't the doctor say not to mix those? I asked. She waved me off. He worries too much. You worry too little, Tom muttered, but he was smiling. I frowned. Didn't Grandma have a stroke? And Aunt Liz? Shouldn't I get checked too? Diane's fork froze halfway to her mouth. You're healthy, she said too quickly. Why borrow trouble? That's not how medicine works, I said, half joking, half annoyed. They always ask about family history at the clinic. I never know what to say beyond high blood pressure and sarcasm. Maybe I should actually know. Tom looked at Diane, and something passed between them, something tight and frightened. I felt it like a cold draft. What? I asked. Nothing, Diane said. We'll look it up later. After dinner, while they were doing dishes, I slipped into their bedroom. I don't know what I was looking for exactly. Proof I was being paranoid, maybe. My heart pounded as I opened the top drawer of Diane's nightstand. It smelled like lavender lotion and old receipts. Under a stack of church bulletins and expired coupons, I found a white envelope labeled MY, medical in Diane's looping handwriting. Inside were photocopies of pediatric visits, vaccine records, and a stapled set of papers from St. Augustine Medical Center dated August 1997. The discharge summary listed Mother, Diane Carter. Infant, baby girl, Carter. But attached at the back was another page, stamped in red, corrected record, see amended file. The correction covered the infant's identification line, but whoever had copied it hadn't lined it up perfectly. At the edge of the white block, I could see the faint curve of an H. That night, my hands finally stopped hovering and opened the DNA kit. If you were me, would you have gone looking for the truth or left it buried? I spat in the tube, registered the kit, and dropped it at the post office on my way to work, my heart pounding like I'd just mailed a confession to the police. After that, every email notification made my stomach flip. But the universe didn't even wait for the results. 3 days later, I came home to find Diane sitting at my kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a mug of tea she hadn't touched. She never came over without texting first. Mom, everything okay? I asked, hanging my bag on the chair. She looked up with wide, wet eyes. You did a DNA test, she said. It wasn't a question. The room tilted. How do you know that? She pulled her phone from her pocket and slid it across the table. On the screen was an email I recognized from the kit company. A relative has matched with you. Underneath was a name I'd never seen. Victor Hale, parent/child, 50% shared DNA. I felt the air go out of my lungs. What is this? I whispered. Diane's voice cracked. I signed up years ago. For fun. To see where my ancestors came from. I forgot it was even active. Then this morning I got that. My ears rang like someone had slammed a door beside my head. Parent/child. 50%. My vision tunneled to those numbers. Is this a scam? I asked, desperate. It has to be a scam. She shook her head, tears spilling over. Maya, we need to talk. Tom arrived 10 minutes later, looking like he'd aged 20 years on the drive over. He stood in my doorway, twisting his keys. Dee, he murmured. She patted the seat beside her. We have to tell her, Tom. I sat opposite them, my hands pressed between my knees so they wouldn't shake. Tell me what? Tom's eyes met mine and flinched away. We always meant to, when you were older, when it was safer. Safer than what? I snapped. Diane reached for my hand. I pulled it back. You are our daughter, she said. Nothing changes that. But you weren't always supposed to be ours. The word supposed sliced through me like glass. Diane inhaled shakily. Maya, you were born as someone else's baby. For a second, I thought she meant surrogacy or adoption, something with paperwork and agency brochures and smiling social workers. That's what I do, after all. I help families navigate systems. What do you mean someone else's? I asked, my voice thin. Diane wiped her cheeks with crumpled tissue. There was a mix-up at the hospital, she said. 2 baby girls born the same night. You and another little girl. Tom stared at the table. They brought us you and said you were ours, he said. We didn't question it. Why would we? But a week later, Diane continued, the hospital called. They said they'd made a terrible mistake, that the bracelets had been wrong. They wanted to switch you back. I felt suddenly weightless, like my chair had vanished. Back where? To your birth parents, Tom whispered. I laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. So what? You just said no? You just kept me? Diane flinched. It wasn't that simple. Your birth father, Victor, he came to see us. He was furious. He had lawyers, consultants, people in suits talking about liability and trauma. We were just 2 scared new parents who'd tried for years and never thought we'd have a baby. Tom swallowed. They said they could make it right. That another baby was available. The room shifted again. Another baby, I repeated. Like a defective product getting exchanged. Diane covered her mouth. The other little girl had complications, she said. She needed more help than we could afford, they said. Victor's family had money, specialists, everything. They wanted their biological daughter back. And you wanted yours, I said, my voice dead. We wanted a daughter, Diane whispered. We already loved you. Tom slid a stapled packet across the table. The first page read, Non-Disclosure and Custody Agreement. August 25, 1997. At the bottom were signatures. Victor A. Hale, Diane Carter, Thomas Carter, and the hospital administrator. My name didn't appear anywhere. We took the settlement, Tom said hoarsely. We were supposed to never contact them, never reveal what happened. They paid for our house, for your schooling. We told ourselves it was best for everyone. I stared at the crisp, black letters of Victor's name, feeling my old life slipping like sand through my fingers. As if summoned by my thoughts, my phone buzzed on the table with an unknown number, and the voicemail that followed changed everything again. I didn't listen to the voicemail right away. First I screamed, then I cried. Then I sat in the shower until the water ran cold and my fingers wrinkled. Diane kept knocking on the bathroom door, begging me to talk. I didn't. When I finally came out, Tom had gone home to give us space, which I translated as to fall apart in private. Diane was curled on my couch, clutching a throw pillow like a life raft. We thought we were protecting you, she whispered. From drama, from being pulled between families, from people who see kids as legal problems. You lied to me every day of my life, I said. You let me grow up thinking we shared DNA when you knew we didn't. We share everything that matters, she insisted. We shared scraped knees and school plays and late-night fevers. But not the truth, I said. Silence settled, heavy and sour. When she finally left, promising to give me time, I was alone in my apartment with the hum of the fridge and the ticking wall clock. That's when I remembered the voicemail. I pressed play, hands trembling. Miss Carter, a smooth male voice said. My name is Daniel Price. I represent Mr. Victor Hale. I believe you and your parents have recently become aware of a historical error involving St. Augustine Medical Center. Mr. Hale would like to meet with you privately to discuss a mutually beneficial resolution. Please contact my office at your earliest convenience. My stomach twisted. They knew. Of course they knew. DNA sites don't just ping my mom. I Googled Victor Hale with numb fingers. The search results were a slap. CEO of Hale Dynamics, philanthropic billionaire, hospital wing donor. Photos of him at galas and tuxedos, smiling with politicians. The man whose name was on the agreement that bought my childhood also owned the hospital where I was born. I stared at his face on the screen, trying to find any resemblance. My nose. His eyes. Jonah texted right then. You okay? Aunt D called. Said you guys had a talk. I typed back. My entire life is a contract I didn't sign. He replied. Then maybe it's time you negotiated your own terms. So the next morning, with my heart in my throat, I called Victor's lawyer back and agreed to meet the man who'd treated me like a line item on a settlement. Victor's office looked exactly like I imagined. Glass, steel, and a view that made the city look like his personal train set. The receptionist spoke in hushed tones, and the water in the waiting area came in glass bottles with minimalist labels. Ms. Carter, a man in a tailored suit asked. He had a carefully neutral smile. I'm Daniel Price. Thank you for coming. He led me down a hallway lined with abstract art to a conference room. Victor was already there, standing at the window, hands in his pockets. Up close, he looked older than in the photos, silver at the temples, lines around his mouth. But he carried himself like someone who expected doors to open before he reached them. Maya, he said, turning. His gaze flicked over my face like he was checking for defects. Thank you for agreeing to meet. I sat opposite him, every muscle tense. You're my biological father. It came out more like an accusation than a statement. He inclined his head. So the tests say. And the contracts, I added. One corner of his mouth twitched. Yes, the contracts. He clasped his hands on the table. First, I want to apologize for the chaos of your beginnings. St. Augustine's made unforgivable errors. My lawyers negotiated what we believed to be the most stable arrangement at the time. Stable for whom? I asked. For everyone, he said smoothly. You were already bonded with the Carters. My wife and I, he paused. We took our biological daughter home. We raised her. The hospital paid, we paid, and everyone moved on. Or so we thought. You didn't think I might want to know any of this? I asked. It was best for you not to live between two worlds, he said. Identity isn't a toy to be passed around. I almost laughed at the irony. Daniel slid the folder across the table that I'd talked about at the start of this story. Mr. Hale believes there is a way to remedy the situation now, he said. For you, and for his family. I didn't open it. What's inside? Victor leaned back. An opportunity. Financial security, education, a position in my company's foundation. A substantial inheritance. A chance to claim the life that should have been yours. My pulse roared in my ears. It sounded like a miracle. Then he added, almost casually. And, of course, the necessary confidentiality agreements to protect everyone involved. I finally opened the folder with numb fingers. Inside was a thick stack of documents separated by colored tabs. The first section was labeled financial provisions, a trust fund, immediate payment, a guaranteed salary if I accepted a role with the Hale Foundation. Zeros lined the page like marching soldiers. The next tab read identity and public relations. There, neatly typed, were conditions. I would legally change my last name to Hale. I would participate in a carefully managed press piece about reuniting with my birth family after a tragic hospital error, emphasizing forgiveness and the strength of the healthcare system when things go wrong. You want me to be your redemption arc, I said. Victor steepled his fingers. I want to correct a narrative that has already gone off course, he replied. Whispers about settlements, speculation about wrongdoing. None of that serves you or me. This way we all win. At the cost of never talking about what actually happened, I said. I flipped to the next tab, legal waivers. I would agree not to sue the hospital or the Hale family for anything related to my birth. The Carters would be offered a separate settlement if they signed similar agreements. So you buy my silence, I said. I compensate you for the disruption this revelation has caused, he corrected. Think of it as an overdue child support payment. The joke didn't land. Daniel jumped in. You'd also have access to top medical care, of course. Advanced screenings, genetic counseling. Mr. Hale's family has a history of certain conditions, and it would be prudent to have you evaluated. Evaluated for what? I asked. Victor's jaw flexed. Nothing you need to worry about now. Just routine tests. My skin crawled. I remembered every intake form at the clinic where I'd written unknown under paternal history. If I say no, I asked. Victor's eyes cooled a few degrees. You walk away with nothing, he said, except a very complicated relationship with the people who raised you, and a story that no one will believe without our cooperation. He said it like a fact, not a threat. That night, back in my apartment, I spread the documents on my floor like a paper crime scene. My life before was built on a contract I didn't sign. Now they wanted me to sign new ones. Would you have taken the deal if it promised to fix everything money could touch? I didn't answer Victor right away. Instead, I started doing what I do best at work, digging, quietly. First, I looked up old news about St. Augustine Medical Center. The early 2000s had a few bland articles about administrative restructuring and improved patient safety protocols. Buried in a local blog, I found a 5-sentence blurb about a brief lawsuit involving neonatal procedures that was resolved confidentially. No names, no details. Then I searched Victor's name with scandal, lawsuit, hospital. There were rumors on message boards, half-formed stories about baby swaps, and hail money cleaning up messes. Nothing concrete, but enough smoke to make me sure there'd been fire. I told Jonah everything over greasy fries at a dive bar. He listened without interrupting, his brows knit. So they want you to become a Hale, smile for the cameras, and never sue, he summarized. Pretty much, I said. He dipped a fry in ketchup, then pointed it at me. And they want medical tests. That part bothers me. Me too, I said. They mentioned a family condition. He chewed slowly. My friend's mom used to work at St. Augustine. She's retired now, but she loves gossip. You want me to ask if she remembers anything? An hour later, we were sitting across from a petite woman in her 60s at a coffee shop near the old hospital. Her name was Lorraine, and she had the kind of sharp eyes that miss nothing. Baby switch, she said when Jonah awkwardly explained why we were there. Honey, St. Augustine had a whole mess back then. 2 babies, rich family, hush hush. I remember because they made us all go to some stupid training about wristbands afterward. I swallowed. Do you remember any names? She squinted at me. I remember the father. Tall, expensive suit, thought he owned the place. She snapped her fingers. Hale. That was it. And the other couple, they were terrified. Folks from our side of town. My hands shook around my coffee cup. Did anyone ever talk about why they made the decision they did? Lorraine leaned in. Off the record, she whispered. There were rumors that one of the babies had a condition. Something in the blood. The rich family didn't want the defective one. The word hit me like ice. Funny thing, though, she added. Years later, I heard their golden child got sick anyway. Something genetic. They were desperate for a match. My heartbeat thundered in my ears. A match for what? Lorraine held my gaze, and suddenly I understood why Victor had looked at me like a solution instead of a person. I went home and dumped Victor's folder back onto the floor. This time, I looked for anything that mentioned medical procedures. Buried in the back of the legal section was a page titled Voluntary Medical Evaluation and Participation Agreement. The language was slick, but clear enough if you read slowly. I would consent to comprehensive testing to determine suitability for potential medical interventions benefiting immediate family members. Nowhere did it say organ donation or bone marrow, but the phrase including, but not limited to, hematopoietic procedures made my stomach drop. Jonah sat cross-legged beside me, reading over my shoulder. They want your parts, he said bluntly. Maybe, I said, but my voice shook. We don't know for sure. He pointed at the line requiring long-term availability for follow-up procedures as medically indicated. That's not a one-time blood test, May, he said. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept seeing Victor's face, the way he'd assessed me. Not like a daughter, like a resource. The next day, I requested my full medical records from St. Augustine. As a social worker, I knew the forms. I filled them out on autopilot. A week later, a thick envelope arrived. Most of it was bland newborn stuff. Weight, APGAR scores, feeding notes. But tucked in the back was a photocopy of a log page from the neonatal unit dated August 18, 1997. 2 entries, one after the other. Baby girl Carter, transferred to room 312 with mother, 10:14 a.m. Baby girl Hale, transferred to NICU for observation, 10:16 a.m. Next to the second line, someone had scribbled and overwritten the name. Under bright light, I could see the ghost of Carter beneath Hale. The ink mismatch was obvious once you knew to look. Someone had literally rewritten who belonged to whom. I made copies of everything and put them in a separate folder labeled in all caps, mine. Then I did something my parents had probably never imagined. I scheduled an appointment with a lawyer. Her name was Reena Patel, and she had the calmest voice I'd ever heard. I slid the documents across her desk and watched her face as she read. "This is a lot," she said finally. "You have more power here than you think, Maya." "Do I?" I asked, because it feels like they're holding all the cards. She tapped the agreement. "They're terrified of this becoming public. That gives you leverage. The question is what you want: money, truth, safety, or some combination." "I want to stop being the only person in the room who didn't get to choose," I said. Reena nodded slowly. "Then let's decide your terms before you walk back into any room with them." The next person I told wasn't my parents or Jonah. It was a therapist, because I needed somewhere safe to say the ugliest part out loud. Dr. Lewis had a soft voice and a knack for leaving silences just long enough for the truth to crawl out. I sat in her office, clutching a pillow, while she listened to me outline the mess. "So your adoptive parents lied to protect you and themselves," she summarized. "Your biological father wants to fold you into his family publicly, but on his terms, which include legal waivers and medical procedures that benefit him." "Basically," I said, "and everyone keeps saying they were making the best choice for me." She tilted her head. "What does best for you mean to you?" I stared at the carpet. "Not being used," I said. "Not being traded like a solution." We spent an hour untangling guilt from obligation. I admitted that part of me wanted the money, the security, the idea of belonging to something powerful after years of scraping by. I also admitted that another part of me still felt like the little girl who'd cry when Diane was late picking her up from school. "Both parts get to exist," Dr. Lewis said. "Neither makes you a bad person." Reena, the lawyer, was more practical. In her office, surrounded by books and a whiteboard covered in bullet points, we drafted my line in the sand. "I will not sign any blanket medical consent," I said. She wrote it down. "I will not agree to an NDA that prevents me from speaking about my own life," I added. "I might agree not to disclose specific financial figures or proprietary business stuff, but not the fact that I was switched." Reena nodded. "Good. What about money?" I swallowed. "If they want to offer financial support, I want it structured in a way that doesn't give them control over my choices. No strings attached scholarships for kids from messed up hospital situations, maybe. Not just a big check dangled over my head." We refined the list. Clear boundaries, transparency for my adoptive parents so they weren't blamed alone, and no public narrative I didn't approve. Reena leaned back. "You're asking for honesty in a room built on spin," she said. "That's brave. It's also non-negotiable." I replied, surprising myself with how firm I sounded. The meeting was set for the following Thursday at Reena's office. Both families, or their representatives, would be there: Victor and his lawyer, Diane and Tom, me, and Jonah for moral support. The night before, I sat on my childhood bed, tracing the pattern on the quilt Diane had sewn, wondering if it would be the last time I saw this room as just home. The next morning, I walked into the conference room with my evidence folder under one arm and my heart pounding in my throat. Everyone was already there when I arrived. Diane sat hunched at one end of the table, clutching a tissue. Tom stared at the water pitcher like it might offer answers. Jonah gave me a quick, steadying nod from his seat beside them. On the other side sat Victor in another immaculate suit, Daniel beside him, laptop open. Reena was at the head of the table, calm and composed. "Thank you all for coming," she began. "We're here to discuss a path forward that respects Maya's rights and the realities of what happened in 1997. Victor's jaw clenched almost imperceptibly. "We're here to finalize the offer we already made," he corrected. Reena smiled politely. "We'll see where we land." I opened my folder and slid copies of the neonatal log and the 1997 agreement into the center. "Before we talk about the future, I want everyone to acknowledge what actually happened," I said. My voice shook, but I kept going. "Someone altered records to switch babies. A wealthy family and a hospital signed an agreement that treated 2 infants like exchangeable goods. My parents took money because they were scared and broke. I grew up with a lie. That's the baseline." Diane sobbed quietly. "We're so sorry, baby," she whispered. Tom's eyes were wet. "If we could go back." "You can't," I said, softer than it sounded in my head. But you can stop making decisions about me instead of with me. Victor's gaze was cool. We didn't come here for a moral seminar, he said. We came to fix the situation. This is fixing it, I said, by bringing the truth into the room. Rena slid a new document forward, our counterproposal. Maya is willing to consider a relationship with Mr. Hale and limited confidentiality around specific financial terms, she said. However, she will not sign blanket NDAs about her own story, nor any open-ended medical consent. Any medical procedures will be considered separately, with full information if and when they arise. Victor's nostrils flared. That's unacceptable. It's not a negotiation, it's a boundary, I said. He turned to Diane and Tom. You do realize, he said, voice low and dangerous, that if this goes public, you will be portrayed as kidnappers who sold a child? That your comfortable little life could be destroyed? Diane flinched like he'd slapped her. Jonah leaned forward. You're the one who wrote the check, man, he said. Glass houses. Victor ignored him. His eyes bored into mine. Think very carefully about who you're protecting here, Maya. My hands trembled under the table, but I didn't look away. For the first time, I am protecting myself, I said. Daniel whispered something in Victor's ear, and his expression shifted, calculating, like he'd just remembered another card he could play. Victor folded his hands. You keep mentioning medical consent, he said. Perhaps it's time to be transparent. My daughter, my other daughter, has a serious condition. She needs a bone marrow transplant. Siblings are often good matches. That's why we requested testing. The room seemed to tilt. You want me as a donor, I said slowly. We want you as part of the family, he replied smoothly. Donation would be an expression of that bond. Diane gasped. You never said. You signed the preliminary paperwork, Victor cut in. You knew there might be medical needs. We didn't understand, Tom protested. We thought it was just checkups. Rena raised a hand. Regardless, coercing medical procedures through financial offers is illegal and unethical, she said. If that's part of the deal, there is no deal. Victor's mask slipped for the first time. My daughter could die, he snapped. Do you expect me to apologize for trying to save her? Pain flashed across his face, real and raw. And for a heartbeat, I saw a father, not a villain. I'm sorry she's sick, I said quietly. Truly, if you'd come to me years ago, honestly, without contracts and spin and buying my silence, maybe this would feel different. But you didn't. You treated me like a spare part. He opened his mouth, closed it. Rena slid our document back toward us. Given what's been said, I'm advising Maya to decline your offer in its current form, she said. She is open to independent genetic testing, with her own doctors, and if she chooses to donate anything, it will be her decision, separate from any financial arrangement. Victor laughed once, bitterly. You think you have leverage because you have a story, he said. Stories burn out. Money endures. Truth endures longer, Jonah muttered. Daniel cleared his throat. Perhaps we should take a recess, he suggested. We stepped into the hallway. Diane grabbed my arm. Maya, if you don't help them, and that girl dies, her voice broke. How will you live with that? How have you lived with what you did to me? I asked. Her face crumpled. Badly, she whispered. The meeting resumed in tense silence. In the end, Victor withdrew the original offer entirely, saying he'd consider his options. But I could see the calculation behind his eyes. If he pushed too hard, I could go to the press. If he did nothing, his daughter might lose her best chance. A week later, an anonymous whistleblower, who I suspect was Lorraine, leaked hospital documents to a reporter. The story broke wide open. That's when an unmarked envelope appeared in my mailbox, with no return address and Victor's handwriting on the front. Inside the envelope was a single typed letter and a much thinner agreement. No trusts, no NDAs, no PR scripts. Just a proposal for a modest scholarship fund in my name for kids harmed by medical negligence, and an invitation to undergo compatibility testing at a hospital of my choosing, with my own legal and medical support. At the bottom, Victor had written in pen, "If you choose to help your sister, I will be grateful. If you don't, I will still acknowledge you as my daughter, privately, if that's what you want. I cannot undo the past. I can only stop repeating it." I sat at my kitchen table, the same spot where I'd opened the DNA email, the wristband, the first offer, and let myself cry. Not just for me, but for the other girl, the one who'd grown up Hale and was now facing something I could barely imagine. In the end, I agreed to the testing on my terms. I won't tell you what I decided about donation. That's a story tangled up with hers, and she deserves privacy I never got. What I will tell you is that nothing about that choice had a price tag attached. No inheritance, no last name, no press release. Just doctors and risk and conversations with Dr. Lewis about how to live with whatever I chose. My relationship with Diane and Tom is messier now, but realer. We go to family therapy. Sometimes I yell. Sometimes they cry. Sometimes we laugh about something stupid on TV and forget, for 10 minutes, that our whole history has footnotes now. Every Sunday, we still have dinner. I bring dessert. Tom still tells terrible jokes. I kept my last name, Carter, and added Hale on my medical forms only, because biology matters there. At work, I've started a support group for people who've discovered late-in-life secrets about their origins. We sit in a circle in a beige room and say the things our families are too scared to hear. If you're listening and you've found out something like this about yourself, here's what I learned the hard way. You are allowed to want answers and boundaries. You are allowed to walk away from money that feels like a leash. And you are allowed to define family as the people who tell you the truth, even when it hurts. These days, my favorite ritual is walking to the park at sunset, watching the sky change colors, and reminding myself that I exist outside anyone's paperwork, last name, or offer. When I ask myself who I am now, the only answer that matters is the one I give myself.